Sacco and Felix, New York and New Jersey's premier attorneys at law. Their team brings decades of experience across a wide range of practice areas. Whatever life brings, they're your legal team. From everyday matters to complex cases, they've got you covered with the experience you need and the results you want. Because when life gets complicated, they make it simple. SaccoFilas.com. SACCOFILLAS.com. 2 C's, 2 L's.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone. Happy and holy Easter and Passover. And it's a great week. The weather has turned. Spring is here. It's actually my favorite season. And Easter's my favorite holiday. More on that later. I think, as many people, I am praying for a successful search and rescue of the Air Force pilot, the weapons man in the plane that was shot down. Miraculously, the pilot, I guess, the other serviceman in the plane was rescued. Really quite remarkable. And we pray that the second man can be rescued also. They do wonderful things, our military. Wonderful, wonderful things. We'll be talking about that later on. I've got Steve Forbes coming up at the half hour, and we'll be talking about the whole world situation. By the by, you can get us over the Internet. You can live stream us over the Internet, LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. Broadcasting from Connecticut, but all the systems are working. It's wonderful. And during the week, coming up, fabulous Fox Business Network. The name of the show is Kudlow. And we are 4 to 5 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. And if for some reason you can't make it at 4, well, just text your favorite 9-year-old, and she'll show you how to DVR the show. And you'll never miss a thing. President Trump's speech Thursday night, I thought it was very strong. And a couple of things. He says, very shortly we're going to hit them extremely hard. There's going to be a big Pentagon, CENTCOM, military push over the next 2 to 3 weeks. He said we're going to bring them back to the Stone Age, where they belong. He said discussions are ongoing, but no deal is made. We have our eyes on key targets. We could hit their oil. I think President Trump is probably, with his advisors, civilian and military advisors, I expect a big push, particularly after our aircraft were shot down. And depends to some extent on the serviceman that's still on the ground in southwest Iran. We will see. But you don't hear much talk about the deal. I mean, the deadline is tomorrow, the original deadline. I won't say original, but the recent deadline for talks and for some kind of deal is tomorrow, April 6th. And April 6th, I don't recall, I think he said 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So I expect to see some fireworks, and certainly Iran deserves everything that we can give them. You know, you've got some of these, almost all the Democrats are opposing this action. And you've got the left-wing legacy media opposing this action, stupidly, in my view. Forever war, no. Mr. Trump is trying to end the forever war, the 47-year war against the United States by Iran. Okay, he's trying to end that, and end their nuclear threat, and end their terrorist threat, and end their threat to the basic freedom and prosperity of the Middle East and the rest of the world. And America, which has tragically lost thousands of service members to Iran or their proxies over the past 47 years. This has to be stopped. It has to be stopped. And yes, Iran hit us with a punch by downing two planes. We've rescued the others. The second plane, the first plane, was still looking for the service member who was on the ground. God bless him. I hope they succeed. Of course, we're praying for that. But that doesn't change anything. Iran has to be completely crippled. They are stubborn and malicious and bizarre and hate us. Their regime hates us. The Revolutionary Guard, Islamic Revolutionary Guard, they're running, they run the country, and they run the military, they run the civilian side now. They're all invested in various commercial business activities. It's like the mafia. They're running all the economic gains or losses, but gains. They're heavily invested in this, and it's going to take, I think, more bombing. Mr. Trump talks about regime change. That's not the first goal. The first goal, I think, is ending their nuclear threat and their terrorist threat. But I think you got to understand this is a business. It's like a mafia business. It's like a cartel, and they're not going to give up. And we must reopen and take the Strait of Hormuz. That's a key point. Mr. Trump has been somewhat ambiguous about that, but I think, personally, my view, knowing him and knowing the situation as best I can, he is going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And the Venezuela model, where we would control the oil flows and control any Iranian oil flows and control the disbursement of any Iranian oil revenues, I think that's where he's going on this. Before it's all said and done, I think that's what he's going on this. Is it a success? Well, I go back to what General Frank McKenzie, who's a retired former commander of Central Command, CENTCOM, and he was on one of the news shows last Sunday, but I want to repeat what McKenzie said. He said, these are not back-of-the-envelope calculations. These are things we've been working on for many years. We're on our way to doing that now. This is part of a plan that's been in existence for many years. We've considered options along the southern coast of Iran, seizing islands, seizing small bases, typically raids in an operation, a planned withdrawal. You're not going to stay, but some of those islands you could seize and hold that would have a couple of effects. First of all, it'd be profoundly humiliating for Iran. What he's saying is, this is a neutral observer, former CENTCOM commander, he's not a political guy, that this is a great success, and that we are ahead of where we thought we'd be when the plans were first made. So I want to echo that. And I want to repeat what I've said before, that even though there's some jitters in the stock market, although there was a big rally this past week and maybe a bottom in the stock market, oil is still, over $100 for WTI and Brent. Although in real terms, inflation adjusted, the oil problem is not nearly as bad. If you looking at this in terms of constant dollars, oil is about $60. It's been much higher in the past. I'm trying to pull out my oil charts, but in any event, the oil price in inflation-adjusted terms is not nearly as bad as in nominal terms, but I understand people have to pay more at the pump for gasoline. It's over $4. In some crazy states like California, it's $6, $7 because of the regulations. I know there's, some pain here, but the economy itself, if you look at yesterday's jobs numbers, which were, I guess, a surprise, but they were very, very strong. And that shows you the resilience of the American economy. And that shows you that the one big, beautiful bill with tax cuts and deregulation and drill, baby, drill, we're producing oil and gas at record rates, the strongest in the world. We are dominant. We are independent. And reciprocal free and fair trade policies, which have worked out. Factories here in the U.S. are being built and expanded, and we have a stronger than expected jobs, only 4.3% unemployment. All that works very well, and this is thus far a successful war. Here's my basic point on this, okay? One way or another, all of Iran's capabilities will be destroyed through military action, whether there's a deal or not. All of our major conditions will be met. And one way or another, our military will soon take control of the Strait of Hormuz, okay? Whether there's a deal or not. I don't care. I don't know what the timing is. The president's suggesting a couple more weeks. I hope that's correct. And I hope he follows through on Hormuz. I believe he will. But again, my basic point, one way or another, I don't know exactly how, I don't know exactly when, but I have great faith in our military. I have great faith in our president and in the mission that he has embarked for almost 50 years. Every president, Republican or Democrat, every single president has said Iran is a threat. And we know they were close to nuclear capabilities. 11 or 12, 10, 11, 12 possible nuclear missions, according to our negotiators, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. So they were an imminent threat. And their ICBMs, we learned, can reach deep into Europe. And it won't be long before the east coast of the U.S., when they fired 2,500-mile missile into the Indian Ocean, which was intercepted and one failed, but the fact remains they were way ahead of what we thought. They are a threat. That is why what we are doing is exactly right. It is the major issue right now in this country. It is the top news story. And I have nothing but faith that we will emerge victorious and totally cripple Iran. One way or another, all of Iran's capabilities will be destroyed. They will lose the Strait of Hormuz, which is their biggest deterrent. The United States and Israel, who has been our great partner in this venture, and even the Gulf states, the Arabian Gulf states, are now pitching in and joining us. This is a mission to stop Iran, which is a blot on the whole world, really, a blot on the world, a blot on economies, a blot on safety, a blot on freedom. We're doing what we have to do, and our strategic objectives are nearing completion, and we're going to finish the job. That is what the president said Thursday evening, and he has repeated that, of course. And we will reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And at that point, let me tell you, folks, oil prices have come down like a stone, and stock market prices are going to rise. There could be a melt-up in the stock market. We'll talk more about the markets later on in the show. But I just want to open first, Happy Easter to everybody. Second, praying for that serviceman in Iran who was down, praying for his rescue from the search. And third, on Easter, let me pray again for our president and our military and the mission, the brave mission that has been undertaken. One way or another, we will end all of Iran's capabilities. We don't need a deal. Our military will do it. It is the right and just thing to do. And I say God bless to all of them. I'm Larry Kudlow. Let me take a break, and we'll be right back with some more.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I want to read from the presidential message, President Trump's message. It's really an Easter message, but it's a message on the anniversary of the death of Pope St. John Paul II. And I'll comment that what you've got is all these reports from everywhere and, studies that there's a tremendous surge in spiritual faith, religious faith, a lot of conversions and baptisms, especially in the Catholic Church. So let me read. Today, Melania and I join with Catholics and freedom-loving people around the world in honoring the immortal legacy of His Holiness Pope St. John Paul II, a man of profound faith, a lion of liberty, and one of the fiercest defenders of human dignity ever. It goes on to talk about how he fought the Nazi occupation of Poland. And then as a priest and a bishop and the leader of the church, he worked tirelessly to end communism and defend the Christian faiths around the world. In the face of atheistic socialism, religious persecution, anti-Semitism, and other threats to human dignity and freedom, Pope John Paul II sparked a moral and spiritual revolution that led to the defeat of Soviet communism and the liberation of the captive nations of Europe. And the president goes on, President Trump, today our nation is similarly yearning for God, not in response to a tyrannical government, but to a culture that has been hollowed out for too long. I applaud the millions of young Americans who are reawakening in faith and know that Pope St. John Paul II's witness will triumph with millions more to find God. And finally, it says, in order to be a great nation, we must never abandon our faith in God, love of country, and devotion to liberty. During this Holy Week and throughout the Easter season, I encourage every American to keep the memory of Pope St. John Paul II alive for generations to come. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Pope John Paul II said, man is incapable of understanding himself without Christ. He cannot understand who he is, nor what his true dignity is, nor what his vocation. He cannot understand any of this without Christ.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So I misspoke. April 6th deadline for a deal with Iran or not, and further military action. It's Monday. Today's the 4th, tomorrow's the 5th, Monday's the 6th. I don't remember the time. I think it was 8 p.m. Eastern time, but I could be wrong about that. In any event, we're going to bring in my very dear friend, Steve Forbes, the great Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, and his latest book is Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. So, Steve, welcome. Thank you for doing this. You're our lead, and I will say happy and Holy Easter to you.
And to you and to Judy.
Yep, and to Sabina as well. You're great to do this. So, anyway, another Steve Forbes prediction comes true. For several weeks you wanted a speech from President Trump, and you got it Thursday evening. Of course, I retreated. I went on for a couple of days of vacation. I'm sure you were on the show. But what did you think of the speech, and what do you think of the situation right now?
Well, I'm delighted he delivered the speech. I'm delighted he hammered home in the speech what the stakes are. My only regret is that he didn't do this at the beginning, so it would have drowned, I think, put the media in the proper perspective when all the criticism started. In terms of where we're at, I'm hoping, I think the president is going to see this thing through. We have to keep hitting. The Israelis have to keep hitting. And I think if they keep hitting, especially the internal security mechanisms there, the Revolutionary Guard and those assets, you will get regime change. And then the key thing after that is to make it clear to the world that the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, the East China Sea, the China Sea, South China Sea, we believe in freedom of navigation. It goes back to Thomas Jefferson when we got rid of the Barbary pirates over 200 years ago. Freedom of navigation. And if we secure that, that'll be a huge victory.
You know, I love the Barbary pilots, and the freedom of navigation is so important. As you say, a couple of hundred years. It's a worldwide principle for the high seas. I want to read. I guess it was yesterday. Yeah, April 3rd. I have my dates wrong. April 6th is Monday. April 3rd was yesterday. April 4th is today. Yesterday, the president put out on Truth, his media site, his social media site. Let me read. With a little more time, we can easily open the Hormuz Strait, take the oil, and make a fortune. It would be a gusher for the world. President Donald J. Trump. That was yesterday morning. That's essentially the Venezuelan model, and that's what I hope he goes for. But he's been a little bit, sometimes he's ambiguous, Steve Forbes, on that. And I don't think he should be ambiguous about liberating and reopening the Strait of Hormuz and, frankly, controlling Iranian oil sales, revenues, and disbursements.
Well, and I think if you get a new government, and eventually I think we will if we keep hammering away, one of the things we have to be on guard against is while our military and the Israeli military are performing absolute miracles in terms of these operations, is the Iranians and their allies, evil allies, think that they can win this with politics, not on the battlefield, but with politics, by undermining the resolve of the United States. We've seen that ugly picture in the past. And I think President Trump making that address, I hope to help dissipate that illusion. But you have mentioned in the past The Economist magazine, Foreign Policy, a big journal in the foreign policy world, has an article which sounds like was written by the mullahs about how Iran is going to win this war. And so they are counting on a political victory. And we have to make very clear there's going to be no political victory. The essence of this regime is going. Strait of Hormuz is going to be open. That oil is going to be coming out. We'll be making negotiations and deals on that. But the key thing is the oil is going to flow. You're going to get a better Persian regime. I wish they'd changed the name back to Persia. But anyway, it's going to be a better world. And one of the things that we should keep in mind, even as we suffer now at the pump, is that those prices will be coming down. As you pointed out time and again, and others, there's plenty of oil in the world. It's just a matter of getting it delivered and refined. It's all there. And so that's why the futures market prices are still very different from what we have in the spot price. So, again, I think if people start to see in the next few weeks when this thing winds up, as I think it will in the next few weeks, they start to see gasoline prices start to come down. The key thing is the trend. And if the trend is right, then the fair American people will cut you slack to think, okay, this thing is getting back to where it should be.
Well, it's a small price to pay. As you have said, I've said, Jack Keane, General Keane talks about this a lot. It's a small price to pay, a temporary blip up in oil prices, which actually, in inflation-adjusted terms, Steve, is down around $60. It's not really up over 100. I mean, we've had, in inflation in real terms, we had $200 oil back in 2008 and $140 to $150 oil for much of the first decade in the 2000s, as people say. So it's still a small price to pay to stop the nuclear and terrorist threat of Iran.
And that's why the president should go forward. You keep hammering home on this, and I think it's a great idea to have a new bill, reconciliation bill. Part of it is 2 great tax cuts on capital gains and personal and corporate tax rates, but also $200 billion plus for the military. If we have a disastrous world where the bad guys are seen as winning, that $200 billion or whatever we now spend on the Iran war will be pennies compared to what we're going to have to do in the future. And the president said in the past, and I wish he'd say it again, if he doesn't do this right now and truly open the Strait of Hormuz and make sure that's never closed and we get a different Iranian regime, then 2 years, 10 years down the road, his successor, 3 years down the road, his successor is going to have a disaster, and people are going to wonder, why didn't we do it? We've avoided it, as you've hammered home time and again. 47 years, we've always hoped for the best with this regime. Now, finally, we've got to deal with it, and future generations will be grateful that a big potential disaster, nuclear-armed Iran, missiles reaching the United States capability is gone forever.
I want to come back to you're very kind on the reconciliation package. I want to come back to that in a minute. But Hormuz, Steve Forbes, just thinking, Hormuz is Iran's last stand, right? It's really their only remaining deterrent, and
it's their Hail Mary, so to speak.
That's right. But the war. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but the article in the Wall Street Journal was a pretty good article. It was a news article, but it was pretty good, saying basically you have to retake and reopen Hormuz in order to really win the war. I mean, if you make a deal or you have a ceasefire, Steve, but somehow Iran is, still on top of Hormuz, it will be a false victory.
That's right, and it will be seen by our adversaries in China, North Korea, and elsewhere, in Russia, as a defeat for the United States. And other nations will say, okay, the U.S. does not have this backbone, the stick-to-itiveness to do things as we did for most of the Cold War, and therefore the U.S. is a declining power. Yes, Hormuz, the regime has to go. Hormuz has to be open. Otherwise, amazingly, despite our great military, it'll be seen as a defeat. We'll lose politically what we gained militarily.
Yes, I agree. I mean, but my gut feeling, I have a lot of confidence and faith. President Trump understands this. He knows how to play his cards. And I know he sometimes says things that sound ambiguous, but I don't think so, because we're still held captive to world oil prices. We may not need any Middle Eastern oil anymore, but we're still held captive to the global price, $100, whatever it's going to be, and that's not a good thing. So I agree with you, and I have a lot of faith in him that he'll make the right call. Steve Forbes, I want to take a quick break for you. You're wonderful to do this, our lead here on Easter weekend. And I want to talk about your piece, lovely piece. Republicans must laser focus on passing Kudlow's economic plan. Well, you contributed to that too, in spirit, if not in fact. It was very kind of you to do that. But let's take a break. We're here with the great Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with the great Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, and we'll talk about some domestic economic policies. A wonderful piece for which I am most grateful. Steve's latest, Republicans must laser focus on passing Kudlow's economic plan. Well, it isn't solely my plan. It's things that we've believed in for years and years and years. Steve Forbes, the great leader on tax policy and monetary policy, including his important presidential runs, which in many ways had big influence on Republican policies. So, Steve, we got to raise $200 billion, some odd, for the Pentagon to complete their mission and keep our military strong. And that will include, there's a $1.5 trillion budget proposal on the table. We've got the Save America Act for the voter IDs, photograph IDs, and citizenship proof. There's no reason why some, imaginative hard work, and that's going to require money, and that makes it a fiscal issue. No reason why it can't get through the parliamentarian if it's done right, as you note in this article. And you've got I think the potential, I know you do too, the potential for some pro-growth tax reform. I mean, for heaven's sakes, why should we pay capital gains tax on inflated assets? It's an illusion. It's long past due, right? We should get rid of that and just pay just the real gains. And then the possibility of some income tax reduction. I love that. There's no reason why they can't. And by the way, there'll be offsets. Now you've got this huge movement, Steve, of fraud, chasing fraud. They put J.D. Vance in charge of it. Already, I heard Emmett Oz talk about it on the Bret Baier show last night. Huge fraud. At least $550 billion in the GAO, and who knows how much for Medicaid and other social programs. It's there. The Republicans just have to do it. They've just got to go after it.
That's right, and especially as these things are scored, as you know, over a 10-year period. And this is what, unfortunately, did not come through with DOGE, was that we're not taking things away from people as much as we're finding out where the money actually goes. And it's astonishing, especially with Medicaid and Medicare, how much money is actually wasted. It does not go for the health of the American people. So if we take a 10-year perspective, sort of a scalpel approach, each year you dig and dig and dig, like that wonderful reporter did in Minnesota with the Leering Center, you're going to find savings after savings after savings. And another thing I wish our Republicans would get some confidence on is growth rates. 1.8%, 2%. If we go back to our historic average, which is no reason why we shouldn't have 3.5, by golly, it becomes a revenue gusher in the next generation, compounding. So I wish the Republicans would act with confidence instead of getting snarled up in parliamentary worries and this, that, and the other thing, and be confident and say, this is how we get America really moving again. People, I think, will respond, especially if you cut those tax rates before the election. Come on.
Oh, boy, do I love that. I just absolutely love that. I mean, in fairness now, the big, beautiful bill has huge refunds and also a number of tax cuts, which are offsetting in the oil shock in the first quarter. And then, of course, the 100% depreciation. But, Russell Vogt, the OMB budget director, and our friend Kevin Hassett at the NEC, they got a 3% growth rate in the president's budget that was just put out. So good for them. It's 3%. I mean, we would have preferred 3.5 or 4. Yeah. Laffer thinks it's 4+. And he may be right, who knows. But I'm just saying they did put in 3%. And they have to be bold. You're right about that. I mean, it's an election issue. It's a growth issue. And people would really, even modest reductions in the income tax rates, down through the middle class area would be so well received. And it's an economic booster shot. It's got to be.
Yes, and you combine that with capital gains, and it would be a real boost for the economy, sort of an Artemis version for the economy. And in terms of what the Republicans, though, we got to keep hammering. They have to come across as actually believing this, confident on this, instead of tentative and faltering and trying to negotiate. No. Be firm. When people see firmness and they like what they hear, and by the way, not to sound too nerdy, but the two brackets that would really help middle-class people are the 22 and 24% brackets.
Yes.
What they should do is expand the bands, so to speak, the thresholds, and reduce those two. If you just reduce those two to, say, 15%, boy, that would be real rocket fuel for the economy. It would also help our problems with the blue state with these deductions. I know we raised them, but this would settle that once and for all.
The 15%, I fought for that when I was at the NEC in the White House. And I fought for that, by the way, in the COVID giveaways. I mean, we got a lot of tax cuts, surprisingly, in the COVID giveaways, particularly for corporations, particularly for the, various loan loss issues, forward and backward. But we never got to the brackets, and you're right. You can raise the threshold and then lower the rate a few points, you'd have a major incentive, work efforts and investment incentives for those middle income brackets. You know, the other thing, Steve.
And one quick thing to keep in mind on that, we saw that in the 80s. Once America starts really moving again, other countries, especially our distraught friends in Europe, will start to see this is the way to go, and this makes America more powerful, not just in economics, but as an example to the world. We saw that in the 80s where 50 countries followed Reagan's example on reducing tax rates. So we got to lead the way. So we should do it for global reasons as well.
I know. We may have to send you back to Europe and persuade them. And, well, you were doing what was the job you had? You were
overseeing Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty,
right?
And using the freedom of information to undermine the old Soviet communism.
Yeah.
And by the way, we got to get our friend Arthur, maybe you and Steve Moore, over to Japan and help our Prime Minister there to get some supply side policy so Japan can be growing again, which would be a great counter to China.
Boy, I tried so hard to convince them when I was in there, but it's a tough sell. I just want to say, it is a little bit nerdy, and legislative process is not the issue. The issue is getting the work done on saving America and the and the Pentagon and the tax cuts. But the only way they're going to do this, and the only way they're going to get the money for Homeland Security and TSA and so forth and so on, the only way is through 50, reconciliation means 50 votes, the vice president's the 51st vote. It's the only way they'll do it. They'll never get 60 votes. The Democrats don't have any moderates left in the party, maybe John Fetterman, but I doubt it on taxes. And that's why reconciliation, I know it's nerdy and I know it's process, but that's the way to do it. They can get 50 votes for a good package. It would be a compromise among different wings of the Republican Party, okay? The growth wing and the citizenship voting and the cutting, fraud and waste, fraud and abuse and all that. The only way is reconciliation. You just have to get 50 GOP votes, and then J.D. Vance, will be the 51st vote, and that's how you get it through, Steve. That's the only way.
That's right, and people don't care about the process. They want to know what's the result, and I think when it shows up in paychecks and with people's pay, that'll be the ultimate success. They'll be happy that it got done.
So one other thing while I got you. You think the stock market bottomed this past week? You had one day was 1,100 points, I think, on the Dow. I'm just looking at, we do a half hour of stock market stuff later in the show, but the Dow was up 1,338 points, and the S&P 500 was up almost 3.5% for the week. You think it's a bottom? You think the correction's over?
I'm not sure, and I think investors, unless they're good traders and getting the kind of information you provide, and we're going to be providing this morning, is that you get some surprise in Iran, something happens, a plane gets shot down, a tanker gets hit, or something like that in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. So you're going to get these ups and downs. The key thing is to be steady, have a sense of where this country's ultimately going to go when this war ends, hopefully in a good way. And that should be your guide, rather than trying to rely on daily headlines.
All right. Steve Forbes, the great Steve Forbes, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief of Forbes Media. Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. Can't thank you enough. We'll take a break, folks, and do some economics with John Carney and Mike Faulkender. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So we had a big jobs number yesterday. Good Friday. Markets, or the stock market was closed, but we had a big number. Total non-farm payrolls up 178,000. More importantly, private payrolls up 186,000. And nobody expected that. So the economy is pretty resilient, and I still think it's backed by the one big beautiful bill, tax cuts and deregulation. And I think we're going to see better and better numbers as oil prices come down and stock prices go up when the Iranian war is over. But anyway, let's bring in our guru, John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance, and co-author of the daily Breitbart Business Digest, which is a must-read. So, John, welcome. What did you make of these numbers? It's a lot stronger than anybody thought.
Much stronger than anybody thought. And I want to point out that you said exactly right. 186,000 private sector. Federal government shrank dramatically. So we're not getting a lift out of the federal government. Now look, there were 89,000, call it 90,000 healthcare and social assistance jobs. But even if we take those out, we're at about 100,000, truly private sector jobs, 15,000 manufacturing jobs, all durable goods manufacturing. So this is 26,000 construction jobs. This is a very good jobs report. I think it will make a lot of people who press the panic button after the February number feel a little silly. I always feel bad when we get a bad number and you have to say things like, well, there was a strike and there was weather, because it sounds like you're making excuses. But this number really does show that, what happened in February was a one-off. They also, by the way, increased the January number. So we are actually running, I think, on a 3-month average at, I think, 89,000, 88,000. So this is a healthy market. And keep in mind that we need far fewer jobs to keep the economy and the labor market steady than we did when Biden was flooding the country with illegal immigrants. Back then we needed 150,000, 200,000 just to keep up with the amount of people coming into the labor market because our borders were open. Now we don't need that many. And so this 180,000 is the Fed recently put out a paper that said we need 10,000 or maybe 0 jobs a month just to keep the unemployment rate steady. So one way of looking at that is we have 18 times as many jobs in March as we needed.
This is a key point. You're making this point. You're really the only one, I think, who's making this point in the Business Digest. I mean, it's a very important point. And John, it's immigration. We're now people coming across the border is turned negative, and that's right. It's turned negative. It's probably close to 3 million now, self-deportations, plus what the ICE agents have done, pushing criminals back over to their home countries. So we're at 4.3% unemployment. That's a low number. It's a very low number, and it suggests a reasonably healthy economy. But we don't need massive jobs numbers. This is going to be, I think, this is going to be a startling fact, probably ignored by a lot of people, but they shouldn't. Okay? No longer can we just look at the number and say, well, we needed 150 or 200,000 jobs. It would be nice. I mean, if these trends continue, by the way, construction's up 26,000. You're building new factories. You mentioned the manufacturing number. And, of course, federal jobs are off, 350,000, 375,000. But because Trump has closed the border and stopped all that nonsense, it has a big economic effect.
That's right. And jobs numbers that I think it will actually take people, particularly liberals in the media who always look for a reason to hate the Trump economy, but it'll take even a lot of economists as well some mental work to readjust how they look at jobs numbers. Where, it used to be if you got 10,000 jobs, you said, that's not enough. Because, by the way, it's important that people understand also, most of the negative net immigration is actually self-deportation. ICE agents didn't throw out 3 million people. Most of those actually were people who realized that America was now serious about border enforcement. The Trump administration has actually given people incentives. They say if you voluntarily go home, you can get back on the list to legally apply to come to America. So people are leaving, and they will, they'll try to come back legally. There'll be far fewer of them. But what this means is that and it's actually going to be very good, because sectors of the economy and businesses, instead of just thinking that there is a open pool of labor, they actually will have to compete for that labor. That will mean higher wages, but it also means that in order to be able to provide the higher wages to compete, they'll have to increase their productivity. Businesses will become more efficient. Competition, including competition for workers, is actually very good for the economy. Back in the 1950s, we had very little immigration, and actually because there had been a birth dearth back in the 1930s, there were very few young people coming into the economy. Yet the economy grew tremendously because businesses were innovating. Also, people were getting healthier, so people in the middle of their life more people were living. But we weren't trying to grow the economy through immigration, which is what Biden did. When you grow the economy through immigration, by the way, you don't grow it per capita. People aren't getting better off. We could grow the economy just by annexing the entire South America and saying, we just grew by the entire size of South America. What really matters is per capita growth, and the only way you get that is innovation and productivity.
Which is rising, productivity doing very, very well, 2.5%. Interestingly, for production workers, average hourly earnings times aggregate hours worked over the past 3 months, it's an income wage proxy, it's up 5%. 12-month change is up 5%, which is much higher than the CPI. John, real quick, the last 30 seconds, does this jobs number affect the Fed?
I think the jobs number will give armament to the hawks. They're probably not going to. It makes it harder to cut, and it should. Look, we are not in an emergency. We don't need a cut. I think it would be good to have a cut because I don't think we have much inflation. But there's not, it gives it gives a reason for them to say we can wait and see a little while longer.
That's probably not a bad thing to do. But after the war is completed and so forth, presumably the Strait of Hormuz opens up and oil prices come down, you're probably setting up for a rate cut, especially in the new Kevin Warsh era. If we can get him in, hashtag free Kevin Warsh. But that would probably, let's see. Boy, we're at early April, May 15th. That's the end for the current Fed chairman, your friend Jay Powell, my friend Jay Powell?
He's out on May 15th as chairman. And they really do need to get Warsh confirmed because, frankly, I've said that I think the law is that Trump gets to appoint one of the sitting governors if there's not a confirmed chairman. But this hasn't really been done very often in the past, and so it's going to be a little chaotic. But for some reason, Powell thinks he can stay as chairman. Yeah, and we really should avoid that crisis. Hopefully the Pirro investigation into the Fed and Powell wraps up very quickly. Or frankly, I think it's inappropriate for Tillis to be saying he wants to promote. Just get it done, and let's avoid a crisis of who's the leader of where nobody knows who the leader of the Fed is. Hashtag
free Kevin Warsh. John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance and co-author of the great daily Breitbart Business Digest. Thank you, John. We appreciate it. Folks, a quick break, and then former Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Faulkender will be here. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So we got a big push on fraud, waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, Medicare, various welfare programs. Vice President J.D. Vance has been put in charge of this hunt for fraudsters. And I heard a report on Bret Baier last night that this is from Emmett Oz, who runs the Medicare and Medicaid divisions of DHS. It's big stuff, and it's going to save a lot of money. We welcome back Michael Faulkender, professor of finance at the University of Maryland, America First co-chairman for America Prosperity, former deputy secretary of the Treasury, helped drive home the tax cut bill. Michael, thank you. I know you're in between classes at Maryland, and I appreciate it very much. Let me just ask a question. Just, on this fraud business, which could be a lot of money and could help in reconciliation for offsetting tax cuts or budget Pentagon increases, is this going to be, you think this will be a truly serious thing, and we will actually implement what kind of fraud that we find?
I do think it's serious, because you saw that the investigation that went on in Minnesota, the recent investigation that's gone on in California, there are tens of billions of dollars in fraud in just those. And so if you aggregate it up to the entire country, there's enormous opportunity for us to revisit not just the eligibility, but the extent to which the states are enforcing eligibility. Part of the problem that you have is that we make these large grants. They're largely matching programs where the federal government takes 50, 70, sometimes 80% of the cost share, but then leaves it to the states in order to verify that the money is being used appropriately and that the recipients are actually eligible. There's enormous opportunity for us to put greater requirements on the states in order to get these matching dollars, because what the Minnesota and the California examples demonstrate is that they didn't want to find the fraud. They wanted to kind of blind their eyes to it, because as far as they were concerned, the state wasn't paying for it, and it's money that's coming into their region. And we have got to change that, and we can do that through reconciliation.
I was listening to Emmett Oz on the Bret Baier show last night. He was there in the raid in Los Angeles, but they have, I don't know, it's about like 100 hospices, okay? And they looked at the data on the hospices. Now, a hospice is for the last weeks, okay? Tragically, whatever, it's the last week. Some huge number, like 90% or more of the people in these hospices were released, and they continued to live. So the scam, federal money is going into these hospices. It's an absolute scam. And in Los Angeles County alone, there was huge, billions, just in L.A. County alone. So there's a lot here. You remember also the GAO studies, 550 billion, waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, this is what Elon Musk wanted to do. Now J.D. Vance can finish the job.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. This is exactly what the task for DOGE was.
Right.
This information exists, and when you think about unleashing artificial intelligence, not just on the information that the federal government has, but linking it to the states, linking it to what's just available on the internet, a lot of this fraud can be detected. So, for instance, one of the examples I was given was, because the states don't report their unemployment insurance rolls up to the Federal Department of Labor, there's really no check to see if somebody's simultaneously claiming unemployment insurance in more than one state.
Right.
So if we build out the systems to cross-check a lot of this information and make sure that people are not engaging in pretty vanilla scams, there's an enormous amount of money that can be realized for the American people. And as you said, we don't need to rebuild our military or take care of funding DHS and yet have that bill run a deficit. It should have offsets that come from saving money for the American people from these scam artists that are using the fact that we have legacy systems that don't talk to each other and that the enforcement mechanisms haven't been in place. So when I was IRS commissioner, that is why we were prioritizing building out the IRS, because if we can get off of 30, 50, 60-year-old computer systems, use modern analytics, use modern artificial intelligence to find pockets of noncompliance, there is massive amount of savings that can be realized for the American people.
One last one, and let's go back to school. Todd Blanche is going to be the new Attorney General, or at least acting Attorney General. Now, Michael, what I'm asking is, you've got Kevin Warsh hearings April 16th and the Senate Banking Committee. He's going to do well, I think. He's going to do very well. He's a smart guy. We know him, and he's great.
I do.
Okay, but the point is, do you think the new AG will, shall we say, suspend the investigation and subpoenas of the Fed in order to get Senator Tillis, from blocking Warsh's nomination? Is anything, do you think, going to change here?
I think that it's a great opportunity for the president to talk to Todd Blanche and put the criminal investigation to an end. I served on the Deputy National Security Council with Todd. I know him well. He's a man of integrity and a very smart guy, very hardworking. But ultimately, I do think it's going to take the president saying that he prioritizes Kevin Warsh's nomination over this criminal investigation into Jay Powell, and that for the benefit of the country, we need to move on and get Kevin Warsh installed and show Jay Powell the pasture.
Jay Powell's, he's finished. He should be finished into retirement. I believe it's May 15th, but it's Kevin Warsh's problem. It's hashtag free Kevin Warsh. So you got a chance. You're right. A new guy. Maybe he'll go in and say to Mr. Trump, all right, it's time to let this go. We want to run the Fed. We want to put our guy in the Fed for the good of the country and the economy.
Absolutely.
All right. Mike Faulkender, very kind to give us a couple minutes. We appreciate it a lot. Hashtag free Kevin Warsh. Next up, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien is going to talk to us some more about war strategies and the final push and President Trump's huge Truth Social placement. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
A new posting from Truth, Mr. Trump's social media account. Remember when I gave Iran 10 days to make a deal or open up the Hormuz Strait? Time is running out. 48 hours before all hell will rain down on them. Glory be to God. President Donald J. Trump. We talked about that deadline, so it's Monday, and we welcome back Ambassador Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor, presently Chairman of American Global Strategies. Robert, welcome. Thanks for doing this. Happy and Holy Easter. What do you make of Mr. Trump's Truth Social posting? 48 hours before all hell will rain down.
Well, blessed Easter to you, Larry, and he's giving the Iranians a little Easter egg, I guess. President Trump is the most transparent president in history, and you and I both know that. He says what he means, and he means what he says. And we've had a pattern here with the Iran situation. He sent Kushner and Witkoff to Geneva. He told the Iranians that if they had a certain amount of time to do a deal. He extended that time. They didn't do the deal. They didn't believe him. And they got hit with the Midnight Hammer first a few months ago, and then they got hit with this Operation Epic Fury now. Now he's told them after basically every target on the air tasking order has been hit, all 10,000 military targets, in an exquisite campaign by our airmen and Marines and sailors. He's now told them, I'm going to turn to your economic, I've spared your economic targets to give you a chance to do a deal, but now if you don't do a deal, I'm going to hit your economic targets. He's being very transparent with them. He's telling them what's going to happen if they don't do a deal, and we'll see what the Iranians choose to do. But I think they've learned a lesson. Hopefully they'll execute on it.
Well, you know, I haven't heard a word in a while about the, potential deal. The last 3-4 days, I haven't heard a peep, and I haven't seen any postings, on Truth Social. So he is, as you say, transparent. He has talked about several times going after their electricity and their power. I presume reopening the Strait of Hormuz would be very important. Maybe going after at Carg Island, which is their economic nerve center. I mean, what do you think? This is the last Pentagon push that people talked about a week ago. And again, I haven't heard a word on, potential deals. So 48 hours to go. You think he'll hit these spots?
I think he will, Larry. And look, the reason is this regime doesn't seem capable of changing. The problem with this regime compared to other regimes is it's motivated by religious fervor and extremism. And so they're not necessarily rational in their decision-making processes. So it's highly likely that they're trying to figure out how to survive, how to start rebuilding their nuclear program, rebuilding their ballistic missile program. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal today that they're already importing ballistic missile fuel from chemicals from China in the midst of the war to try and restart that program. And if that's what they think is going to happen, they're going to basically lose the means to purchase all those items and to pay the scientists and to engage in espionage across Europe to steal what they need for their nuclear program. If they have no oil revenue, they've got nothing. And so if they aren't going to do a deal, then the president's going to have to eliminate their ability to pay, to take away their resources that they would invest in their programs. And that means Carg Island, that means the gas fields, that means the oil fields, that means their economic infrastructure, their ports, their rail terminals, their electricity grids. Basically, as President Trump said, falling back to the Stone Age so that they can't produce the revenue they need to invest in their ballistic missile and their nuclear programs, which seems to be the most important thing to the regime.
Talking to Ambassador Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor. Robert, I'm hoping that we have a Venezuela model applied to Iran where we reopen the Strait of Hormuz, essentially take it over, but really any oil revenues to Iran should be, deposited in escrow in the U.S. Treasury Department. We will oversee all of that, and we will oversee any of the spending of those revenues, the disbursement of those revenues. So we will hold, a complete chokehold on Iran's economy.
Right. What you're describing is basically the old Iraq oil for food model that we put in after the first Gulf War to try and control it. Saddam found ways to corrupt that and to try and to get around it. But look, we'd like to do that. That would be the ideal, outcome here. But I don't think the Iranians are going to play ball. And if they don't play ball, they're going to have their oil. They're not going to have revenue in account at the U.S. Treasury at the Federal Reserve. They're going to have no oil fields to produce. They're going to have no terminals to export from. They're going to have nothing. And I fear for the Iranian people, and I feel bad for them. But that's the route we're going.
What about this? So two planes were shot down. The second plane was reported. We rescued both people in the plane, and the first one. We rescued one, but there's a tremendous search and rescue operation going on for the second. Now we're praying for him. We are praying for him. I think he was the weapons guy in the airplane. But people are saying, well, that shows the war is not a success, and that shows that Trump is doing the wrong thing, and that shows we should immediately get out of Iran. I mean, does this change anything in your view? Shooting down these two planes?
No, what it shows is how dangerous it still is for our operators, and especially our pilots, who are at the tip of the spear. And look, this is close to my heart. I've got a daughter who's an Air Force pilot, and a son-in-law who's an Air Force pilot, and they go to SEER school, search evasion, resistance, and escape school, and they're trained for these sorts of things if a plane goes down. But gosh, you feel you pray for our pilot, you pray for his family, his wife and kids, or his parents, and so that's important. But what we need to understand is we've hit 10,000 targets, Larry, and we've lost 2 planes. I mean, it's two fighter planes. We lost a refueler early on in the conflict with terrible lost life to that crew. But this is perhaps the most exquisite military operation ever run, certainly air operation ever run in history. The way that these pilots and our battle managers have put this thing together is just incredible. And the success is incredible, and we need to focus on the success. Look, when we engage in a military operation, we're going to have casualties and deaths, and that's a tragic part of it. But these men and women are fighting to keep us safe and promote American interests in the best tradition of American fighting men and women. And they're doing a great job. And so far, we've been very fortunate that going up against an army of 2 million people that the Iranians have, and all the Chinese anti-aircraft weapons that they had, and the Russian kit that they had, and we've suffered so few losses that I think that's what we need to focus on, while at the same time keeping this pilot, this the backseat, goose from Top Gun, in our prayers. We need to pray for him and his family, but we also need to understand the skill and professionalism and capability our Air Force and Navy aviators have shown in this campaign.
Yeah, it's like a boxing match, Robert. So, one guy's getting clobbered round after round, and he finally lands a punch or two, but it doesn't change the fact that he's going to lose the fight. I'm just so interested in Mr. Trump's Truth Social today. 10 days to make a deal. That's Monday. I thought it was 8 p.m. Eastern time, but I could be wrong. And time is running out, and all hell will rain down on them. I mean, that's just, he's sending them a message. And as you said, he's a transparent president. He is sending them a message, Robert. Just last 30 seconds.
Well, look, what President Trump is doing with this operation is well within the traditions of American national security policy. It's like Reagan did with Operation El Dorado Canyon against Libya, bigger, but in that same vein. Just cause that George H.W. Bush did against Noriega, and even Woodrow Wilson sending General Pershing down to stop Pancho Villa. So this is a punitive, what military analysts would call a punitive expedition. He's calling it a short-term excursion. He's doing it masterfully, and we're going to see the culmination of it coming in the next week or two based on his Truth Social post. And God bless the men and women of our Air Force and Navy and Army and the Marines who are doing such a great job implementing the President's orders and protecting us.
Ambassador Robert O'Brien, who's now chairman of American Global Strategies, former National Security Advisor. Robert, happy and holy Easter to you and Lo Marie. Thanks for helping us, as always. Folks, we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, Bruce Blakeman, Nassau County Executive and running for the New York governorship against Hochul and Mondami. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
All right, just talking to Bruce Blakeman, who's on a boat, but we're going to get him as soon as he can call in, or we can reach him. I assume you guys have his number, too. Anyway, Bruce Blakeman is closing in his race against Governor Hochul. He's down... double, 10, 12 points, something like that. His own internal polls show him he's down, I think, 8 or 9 points. He had a recent interview, podcast interview with the great Miranda Devine of the New York Post, and talked about, this is a race against Governor Hochul, big taxer and spender and lefty, and the climate nut, although she's trying to backtrack. A year ago, she told all the people leaving New York, the wealthy, successful people. She said, go ahead, leave, I don't care. Now, all of a sudden, she is begging them to come back, but they're not going to come back under current policies. And they're still talking about a tax hike in the legislature, a corporate tax perhaps, which would be absolutely devastating to New York business, which is underperforming, state GDP underperforming, tremendous spending. It's probably a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. The fraud group run by J.D. Vance is going to be taking a good look at New York. So all of those things, Mr. Blakeman, the Nassau County executive, he won re-election, heavily Democratic. All right, we got Bruce Blakeman. I'm glad I got you on the boat. I know it's a nice day. Happy and holy Easter. Sorry to do it. But
we're happy to be here, Larry. Thank you so much. We're actually down in Florida. We have a fundraising trip down here, and we're meeting with a lot of New Yorkers who left New York because of Kathy Hochul, and they said they'll come back when I'm governor, and I will be governor on January 1st.
So she's trying to stop you from matching funds, all right? The chicanery involved here is unbelievable. I think you're going to raise a lot of money anyway, but can you take this to court?
Yes, we're going to take it to court. First of all, we filed in time. I was certified. Then they changed the rules and said that the governor and the lieutenant governor candidate have to file together. They said they would create a form to fill out. They never created the form, so there was never a form to fill out. It's just cheating on the part of Kathy Hochul. It's dirty politics. People hate that kind of stuff. But it's typical of the Democratic Party in New York because they know they can't win a clean race. So we're just going to fight them, and we will make sure that we do everything to have a clean election. And if we have a clean election, we will be successful.
So you told my pal Miranda Devine in a great podcast interview, just want to read this, you would gut the green energy mandates, slash delivery costs, and lower taxes that he claims are responsible for 70% of the average utility bill. And New York has huge utility bills, huge electricity bills. So deregulate, forget about climate, which is dead in the water federally, and cut taxes.
Absolutely. Larry, there's no reason why New York pays 50% more. That's 50% more than the national average for electricity, other than the fact that Kathy Hochul has this green energy scam, produces very little energy, but it lines for contributors with lots of money. It fills their coffers so they can contribute back to her. It's pay for play. It doesn't produce energy. And by the way, Larry, we're sitting on one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world. It's almost the same as Saudi Arabia. And why we are not drilling, that would also bring energy costs down because, as you know, just elementary economics, supply and demand. If you increase the supply, then you'll bring down the cost. We know the demand is going to be high, especially with AI now and data centers. The demand's going to be high, but we're not meeting the supply side of it. We're sitting on this big natural gas reserve, and we're not drilling, we're not exploiting it, and that's why our energy costs are so high throughout the state, and that's why our state is so poor. North of Westchester, the state, if it was a state unto itself, would be the poorest state in America. It's a national embarrassment. Kathy Hochul hasn't done anything to create economic development. She's just driven away people and driven away jobs.
You know, if we had fracking and drilling and oil and gas production in that Binghamton area, it would benefit all of upstate New York, as you said. It's really important. I mean, Pennsylvania did it, right, Bruce Blakeman? With a Democratic governor, Pennsylvania did it. And they are flourishing. It's like, you know, West Berlin and East Berlin in the old days of the Cold War. I mean, it's just a tragedy that New York didn't take part in the tremendous reservoir of oil and gas. But one last thing, I don't want to take too much time, but you told Miranda, and I think this is really important, you're not only running to beat Hochul, Governor Hochul, you're running to stop our anti-Semitic left-wing socialist mayor Mandami. So it's really a twofer, and that's why the stakes are so high.
Well, absolutely, because Zoran Mandami is a communist. In his inaugural speech, he talked about collectivism as a virtue versus individualism, which is the cornerstone of the Judeo-Christian work ethic and the economics of this country, where you work hard, you play by the rules, you use your ingenuity, and there's a reward. Well, he wants to take the reward away from everybody. He wants to increase property taxes in the city of New York by 9.5%. He wants to impose a death tax where anybody who has assets over $750,000, if they die, he wants to tax that money that's already been overtaxed and basically take away the equity that people have in their homes and their small businesses and their family-owned businesses. He wants to take wealth away from the middle class and redistribute it to people who've moved to New York illegally. They've been here for 15 minutes. They're already receiving billions of dollars in all kinds of subsidies. It's a national disgrace what we're doing in New York. We're ruining the economy of this state. And Zoran Mandami and Kathy Hochul are in league together. They want this to be a socialist democratic state, which, as Winston Churchill said, is nothing more than shared misery.
Yeah. Sheep in sheep's clothing. So a Governor Blakeman will veto all of that. If Hochul's reelected, she'll cave in on the taxes. You know she will.
Well, she did the same thing with congestion pricing, which is nothing more than a tax on the middle class. She said that she was putting a pause on it, and the day after the election, she imposed congestion pricing. And by the way, congestion pricing is, if Kathy Hochul gets reelected, it's coming to a community near you. It'll be on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. It'll be in Queens Boulevard in Queens. They desperately need money to fund all of their phony programs and the green energy scam. And now we're seeing all this Medicaid fraud and waste. Our Medicaid costs are twice the amount of the state of Florida, and Florida's bigger. So I'm a governor. I'll be a governor who will stop all this, cut taxes, create jobs and prosperity.
Bruce Blakeman, Nassau County Executive, running for governor and closing in on Kathy Hochul. Thank you, Bruce. Happy New Easter. Folks, we'll take a break and then do some stock market work on the other side.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, everybody. Hour 3. It's great to be with you. By the way, you can live stream us over the internet. You get, LarryKudlowShow.com, LarryKudlowShow.com. We're heard all across the country, throughout the world, including the solar system and the Milky Way. And we're going to do some stock market work. We got Nancy Tengler, CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Laffer Tengler Investments. And her latest book is The Women's Guide to Successful Investing. And Jeff Kilburg, who's the CEO of KKM Financial and Notre Dame Football. Put it right in there. Anyway, we had a big week. Stocks up. Dow is up 1338. S&P 500 was up 214. The NASDAQ was up 931. So it's about, 3% increase for the Dow, 3.4% for the S&P. And some people are wondering maybe this past week was a bottom. The pullback for the S&P was 9.1%, if I have that right. And have we seen the worst of oil prices? The president has issued a very strong warning. Remember when I gave Iran 10 days to make a deal or open up the Hormuz Strait. 10 days to make a deal or open up the Hormuz Strait. Time is running out. 48 hours, that's Monday, folks, before all hell will rain down on them. Glory be to God, President Donald J. Trump. So how does that figure? Anyway, what do you think, kids? Nancy, you first. Do we dare think there's a bottom? And what do you make of this rain down all hell? The last Pentagon push, perhaps.
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, this is a pragmatic president who understands the peril of letting this drag out too long and also the peril of letting them off scot-free. So at the risk of sounding like a warmonger, you know, Larry, that my son's a Navy pilot. I'd like to see him home for Christmas. And he's about to deploy. So I think, you know, we are in the position of strength, and I think there's a bull case to be had under all of this. You got corporate profits up, margins are near historic highs. One Big Beautiful Act refunds are up 20% year over year in March, so that should mitigate some of the higher energy costs. And on an inflation-adjusted basis, you know, a gallon of oil hit $6.17, inflation-adjusted, in 2008. We're not close to that, and we spend a lot less on energy as consumers, and our fuel efficiency is better, requiring less. Tariffs are going to, you know, provide a tailwind to the economy to the tune of $70 billion. And then you've got a stable job market, productivity in all caps, which we've been talking about for years. You and I witnessed it in the 90s, and I'm sure Jeff did too, by the way. It's great to be on with you, Jeff. Big fan. And then a market multiple of 19 times. So 10 years behaving in the range. I think we're in a position, we bought calls on the market last week, and I think we rarely do that, but I think we're in a position to see stocks take off. AI stocks have been consolidating, and I think they have an opportunity to really reignite and soar. So I'm pretty optimistic. Best time to own stocks is, after periods of decline, and what follows every bear market, a bull market, and we saw the Nasdaq enter correction last week. So I think this is all good. Could go down a little more, but I think we're positioned well. Yeah, the bull-bear ratio, way too bearish. I'll throw that one in too. I like what you said about scot-free. I talked to Steve Forbes at the beginning of the show. He made the same point, that the president knows that he must reopen the Strait of Hormuz in order to really declare victory. And he's not going to let Iran off on this. And I think that's a really important point. And I think basically that's what he's talking about with all hell will rain down. We're going to reopen the strait, and we're going to run the strait, and we're going to run the oil story, and we're going to run Iranian oil. And any money they get, we're going to run that. Any disbursements, they're going to run that too. I mean, I think that's coming. But, Jeff Kilburg, do you see it the same way, or are you more concerned?
Well, Larry, Nancy's the smartest person in the room, so I do agree with her. And just to add on,
she's always the smartest person in the room.
She's 100%, no matter the room.
She's always, whatever the room is. I mean, if she comes on set, all right, it's stage J, that's where we broadcast. She's the smartest woman in that room.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I want to piggyback on what she talked about, and we're about to go into earnings season, so we're looking for the 6th consecutive earnings season of year-over-year growth over double digits. We're talking 13% of the forecast. But what's interesting, and if I could jump into the options market for a second, and why I agree with Nancy that I think last week was a bottom, this off-ramp that President Trump provided us, yes, we need to stay on the off-ramp, which I think we are. They've been given another couple of weeks. But what was interesting, last Monday when we saw really, really peril in the market, you saw a little bit of panic, the VIX was over 30. What happened that day when we saw the greed and fear index went to the lowest reading, extreme fear of 9, single digit? We saw options in the S&P 500. The volume surged. We saw over 13 million S&P 500 options traded, but the put-to-call skew. Nancy was smart buying calls, but the rest of the knuckleheads in the market were 62% buying puts. And when you see that type of put buying, that was a capitulation. Not a true conventional capitulation, Larry, where you see the market have a new low, but we put a new low in the S&P 500, almost under 6,300. We saw those options really get offside, and Tuesday we saw a little bit of optimism, and that off-ramp represented the markets, and all of a sudden, boom, we saw the S&P 500 go from 6,300 to 6,600 due to the fact that so many people were offsides in their positioning. So I think if we could get through this 48-hour deadline without all hell breaking loose, I think the market has the ability, believe it or not, to make new all-time highs in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Which was it Tuesday or Wednesday that the market went up 1,100 points, the Dow?
Turnaround Tuesday.
So That's got to mean something, because that was a big move. I think
it meant a lot, and I think the options market validated. That was my whole point, and not to get too wonky, but when you see a double volume surge in options and that put skew, meaning so many people are buying protection, that really kind of was the telltale to me. And then we saw it snap back. The VIX went back down to 23. So I think people are realizing, and this was also one other thing, Larry, the disconnect. We saw crude oil go up $12, $15 from the rhetoric from President Trump on Wednesday evening. And what happened? The markets recovered. They were down 2% overnight, and they went back to even, actually snapped a almost 10-week losing streak for the S&P 500. So we ended the day positive because the market is bottoming before the solution is truly presented. So I think that's important, and that typically happens in all conflicts going back decades and decades. The market turns around first.
It's interesting, Nancy, on that point. The market turns around first. I think that's right. There's a lot of wisdom in the market. There's so many bears. And the bearishness, I think, has a lot to do with the Trump derangement syndrome, where the media coverage of the war is so bad. With some exceptions. Fox is an exception, Newsmax is an exception, but by and large, the media coverage is anti-war, we're failing, everything's bad. Wall Street, I think, is guilty of that. Once upon a time, Wall Street was a lot different than it is today. And the liberals on Wall Street, they're all making such bearish cases that it's so bearish, it's going to have to be bullish, because they're missing. The market is sending a different signal than the gurus, the portfolio managers, the geniuses who talk to the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or CNBC. They're wrong. They're going to be very wrong, I think.
No, I agree completely. And in fact, there was a cover on The Economist where it said "Advantage Iran" with a hand around like a sort of a neck, I guess, was what it was supposed to represent. And that's just baloney. I think when I go, I don't know if Jeff feels the same way, but when I go to conferences, there are an awful lot of very young people who have only lived in a world where, bond prices go up and yields go down, and we have, moral hazard intervention, lack of moral hazard intervention from the government. And so when we get an actual crisis, the algorithms read the headlines, the hedge funds jump in, and add to the volatility. And for me, that's an opportunity. It kind of makes me crazy at times, but it's an opportunity to buy great companies on sale. And that's what we did during DeepSeek. Remember, we were in a NASDAQ bear market in the first quarter of last year. We were in buying hand over fist, picking off names like NVIDIA at $108 share, Palantir at 88, Tesla at 240. Even with the pullbacks, these names are up significantly. And I think that's where you have to have some experience in dealing with geopolitical shock or, headline news. And you're right. It's all negative all the time. And, that will drive the markets in the near term. But again, not for the long term. And that's the opportunity.
And I think, Jeff Kilburg, you're right. The earnings, profits are the mother's milk of stocks. You sort of keep your eye on the earnings. In a way, you shouldn't worry about the politics or the military or the war. I know you have to look at that, but in a sense, the earnings are more important. That's the message you have to watch. The earnings are coming in great. You're right, double digits. The outlook, forward earnings, very, very good. 335, something like that. That's a 19 times earning multiple. That's the key point. People miss that. Profits are everything in this game.
And I'd add on that people don't realize, but this Iranian conflict that we're finally fixing after 47 years of them screaming death to America, we are going to see a deflationary period, Larry. We're going to see energy come down. People are rerouting supply chains, and you're going to see energy not be at $50, $60 in crude oil. It's going to be at $40 or $50, and that is the solution that I get so excited about, and that's why we're going to see this bull market go again for another fourth year. And that's why I get excited about, Nancy brought up the opportunity. Look at the dispersion. We've never seen dispersion between the number one S&P 500 sector being energy and the worst being financials. That's a 50% performance dispersion. So we're picking up names like, Duke Energy, Marathon Petroleum. We've been looking at the Johnson & Johnson, the Essential 40 ETF that I run. Those are big blue chip names, and this broadening out of the stock market, we're just tackling it. We're so excited because we see the back half here, once we get through this solution, is going to be so surprising to the bears. And I can't wait to kick those bears in the teeth and we make new all-time highs here in the next Q2.
It's fabulous. People in the oil industry, if you talk to the trade group and some others, they'll say that production costs, marginal costs to produce the extra barrel of oil is somewhere in the low to mid 60s, okay? We're over 100 now. But I had dinner, I'm not going to say with whom, but I had dinner with a very senior executive of an enormous oil company, okay, I'll leave it at that, who told me that they can make money at $35, okay, $35, all right?
Yeah.
So your point about 40 to 50 may seem a long stone's throw from where we are now, but you know what? It's in the mix. You're exactly right. It's in the mix. And we are much more energy efficient, and we produce enough, so we don't need a lot of Middle East stuff. Anyway, I got to take a quick break here. Nancy Tengler of Laffer Tengler Investments, Jeff Kilburg of KKM Financial. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Talking stocks with two of the best, Nancy Tengler, CEO of Laffer Tengler Investments. Her book is The Women's Guide to Successful Investing. And Jeff Kilburg, CEO of KKM Financial. Nancy, I'm a big follower of Ed Yardeni, not for political stuff, but he's just gives you great stock market stuff. And he's saying on these 200-day moving averages, the worst hit, and therefore the cheapest, might be consumer discretionary, financials, and infotech. Just wondered what you thought about that.
No, I love them too. We've been adding to consumer discretionary names, trying to span both the high income consumer and the lower income. So we have been buying things like Ulta, and TJ Maxx. We also own a number of other names in the group, not the least of which is Amazon. And you could also argue that, and Walmart, even though that's a staple, you could also argue that Apple is a consumer discretionary, but and we've held that as in our Infotech holdings as kind of the T-bill of technology names, very defensive. And then we're overweight and have been adding to technology. So a little different than Jeff and our ETF, TGLR, we were selling or trimming about 20% of our energy holdings and buying up some of the beaten down tech names like Microsoft, adding to some of the infrastructure names and trimming back names that have been done really well for us like Lam Research. So it's, investing is about being mostly right. So that's my goal. That's how you compound into the top deciles or percentiles.
Jeff Kilburg, I got a little less than a minute. Bank stocks, they're profitable and capital requirements are coming down with deregulation from the Fed. What do you think of banks' financials?
I specifically like J.P. Morgan. We're ending that position, but I'm going to go back to your dear friend and my former football coach, Lou Holtz. Unfortunately, he's since passed. But he had an acronym, Larry. He had an acronym of WIN, and it stood for What's Important Now. And for all the investors listening right now, what's important now is, to Nancy's point, rebalance, reposition, understand owning great companies at great discounts is where you're going to be positioned to make money in 2026. So to Coach Holtz and all the people, the lives that he affected, mine being one of them, I'm grateful for everything he gave to me. But I think that acronym, WIN, you have to take that with you. What's important now?
So, first of all, he affected my life. I loved him. I served on 2 boards with him. He was just an extraordinary person. And, a man of great faith, which I just love, and always helps everyone around you when you have a person of great faith. worth thinking about here on Easter, right? A wonderful holiday, happy and holy. Kids, you're great. Nancy Tengler, the smartest woman in the room, no matter what the room is. And Jeff Kilburg, thank you for bringing up Coach Holtz. Terrific stuff. You're both wonderful. And the market's going to be very, very good as America marches on. Folks, I'm Kudlow. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to do some money in politics with my pal Steve Moore and my pal John McLaughlin, the great pollster. Please stick around. A lot more coming.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
So polling during this election year and wartime is just abominable. Just abominable. Polls routinely cited in the media, completely biased against Republicans and against Trump and in favor of Democrats. An important point, because so much of the legacy media is opposed to Iran and suffers from the Trump derangement syndrome. And meanwhile, the Democrats may be getting a little cocky about the midterm elections. So let's talk to Steve Moore, dear friend, WABC radio host of More Money, which comes up right after this show on most of these same stations, and John McLaughlin, ace pollster, strategic consultant, CEO of McLaughlin and Associates, also an advisor to Bruce Blakeman, who did very well. We had a great interview with him. I called him direct. He was on a boat in Florida. Anyway, he was terrific stuff. Gentlemen, welcome. Happy and holy Easter to both of you and your families. And John McLaughlin, I want to start with you. You're sort of angry at, the Reuters Ipsos poll. And I don't know, it's just like all the others. I see the citations of YouGov, and you wrote a piece on that. Why are they all so biased?
They're biased against President Trump. They got Trump derangement syndrome. And that Reuters Ipsos poll, it's an online poll of adults, and it skews left of center. And I'll tell you that the questions they ask, they never ask, if you think Iran had a nuclear weapon, would they use it against the United States and our allies? They don't ask that. They don't ask, we asked the question earlier in March where we said, do you approve or disapprove of President Trump, the U.S. using military action to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon? 51-41 they did. They also thought they agreed it was warranted and justified, 57-33. And now that we're there, they agreed we ought to finish the job to make sure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. The majority of likely voters in America agreed 59-31. Now, the Reuters Ipsos poll that was published today of adults never asked about nuclear weapons, even though President Trump did a wonderful direct address about why and what he's doing in Iran to stop them from getting nuclear weapons, because they would use it. They're dropping missiles on allies and civilians and our military bases. But in that question, they had a question, do you think that the quality of life of Iran is better or worse because of the United States military action? I mean, they care about the quality of life in Iran at a time when we're at war. I mean, thank God they weren't around when Hitler was marching through Europe or something like that.
Geez,
I mean, it's unbelievable.
What's your, in your polling, what is President Trump's approval rating, and what is the sort of general view of the war?
We have him hovering about 50% right now among all voters.
Yep.
And the problem with the war is the media. If only 4 to 10 voters listen to Fox, Newsmax, conservative talk radio, there's another 4 and 10 that are getting propaganda from the left. They might as well be Iranian state television or something like that. But if we're hanging on to this majority right now, and we've got to win this war. The price of gas has to come down, which you're forecasting. You know far more about economics than I do. You and Steve do. And but we've got to get through this. And President Trump gave them 8 days ago to open the Strait of Hormuz. They now have 48 hours to do that.
Yeah, he had a You had a very tough Truth Social. All hell's going to rain down. You know, Steve Moore, it's funny, the economy is supposed to be nosediving because of the war and gas prices and so forth, but the jobs report that came out yesterday was gangbusters, and people kind of forgot that the one big beautiful bill had a lot of powerful tax cuts and tax incentives. So I don't care what these polls show. Things are a lot better than people think.
Yeah, I was, on Maria's show yesterday morning when that number came out, and literally my jaw just dropped on the screen because it was such a powerful number, way, way higher than anybody expected, including myself. And it shows there's a lot of resilience to this economy, and we have there's a really good small business pickup in jobs. One of the themes of the Trump presidency that followed through in this report was to drain the swamp, get rid of the federal workforce as much as possible. We've already cut 300,000 out of the needless federal workforce and grow the private sector, productive sector of the economy. We saw jobs pretty much across the board, Larry, in construction, manufacturing, professional services. So it was a good report. We'll see, whether this continues through April and May. But I'll stick with what I said on your show the other night, Larry, which is when we get the straits open, the price of gas will fall just as sure as water falls downhill, and we'll see the price get back to $60, maybe $70 range for a while, and then dip even lower than that. And when that happens, in my opinion, Mr. McLaughlin, I think people will feel a lot happier about the economy.
Steve, just one other point on the hotline that you put out, which is so fabulous, Committee to Unleash Prosperity Hotline. The real crude prices, you inflation adjust.
Yes.
Oil, okay. And you look at this thing, in the Carter 70s, it was $160 a barrel. Okay,
in today's dollars, right?
Then in today's dollars. Then it crashes during the Reagan years as he decontrols. It stays down during the Clinton years. Then, in the 2000s, it rises to $200 a barrel. This was 2008.
That was Obama.
I think the first one was Bush, and the second one was Obama. Right. Yep.
Okay. Right.
And averaging about $160 a barrel for quite some time. Anyway, now you have it. Let me see. You're down at $60 a barrel in real terms. Now that suggests that it's not going to be the shock that people and especially economists think. It's not going to be the shock because the real number is much $60 a barrel. I mean, really, that's not bad.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points on that. Number one, if you look at the 5 years that Trump has been in office and the 4 years Biden was in office, you know which one had a higher average gas price? Biden.
Way.
Even when you count for the last few months.
Yeah.
So people forget that Biden's performance on gas, and by the way, that's what they wanted to happen because they hate gas, they hate oil, and if you cut the supply, you're going to have an increase in price. And thank God Trump has done drill, baby, drill, or we'd be paying $150 a barrel of oil today. The other thing I just want to warn about, Larry, that because the gas price is high now, I'm hearing all of the dingbat ideas from the Democrats that Jimmy Carter tried back in the 1970s, like windfall profits taxes and things like that, which are only going to make the situation worse. You're right. When Reagan came in, within 18 months, he cut the gas price in half.
It's really something. I'm looking at your chart. Late Carter, this is, again, inflation-adjusted real gasoline prices. Late Carter was $160 a barrel. Late Jimmy Carter, late 70s, okay? And then Reagan comes in, this is the 1980s, and it drops down to $40 a barrel. Is this wonderful?
That's and actually 75% reduction in price.
Yes, and actually in the Clinton years, it gets down to $25 a barrel. I mean, it's really quite amazing. So there's a little too much pessimism about that. Now, John McLaughlin, pollsters will never pick that up. They don't bother to do that. But again, if the economy outperforms, the midterms are going to look a lot better.
Absolutely. By the way, Bruce Blakeman what he didn't tell you was that, I mean, we had him within 9 points, 52 to 43. So he's way ahead of where Lee Zeldin was at this point. And that Siena poll, which usually has too many New York City voters, too few Republicans, because they do registered voters instead of likely voters, they had us within 13. Mm-hmm. And the big game was Bruce ran a week of statewide TV on cable and to opinion leaders, saying he would reduce the utility bills by 50%. Right. And Hochul's had 36 increases. Plus, she had this climate change legislation. Mm-hmm. So, Bruce, the public opinion in New York has changed, where voters are now willing to, okay, we ought to do some more oil and gas drilling upstate, like Pennsylvania does. Yeah. And we ought to get rid of these climate change regulations. Where Hochul saw in her polls probably that this is hurting and Bruce is gaining, and she's got a 51 disapprove and only a 42 job approval in our polls. So she's upside down. And people got their utility bills in March after a cold winter, and they're like, heck, with climate change, they can't afford the utility bills on top of the taxes in New York.
I talked to Bruce Blakeman earlier, and we talked about this directly, and why not open up some fracking and drilling in New York? It would affect, it would be around the Binghamton area, and southwest New York State. But you know what? It would affect all of upstate New York. It would be a booster shot, all because of the spillover effects and the knock-on effects. Pennsylvania did it, right? And I always compare Pennsylvania versus New York. It's like West Berlin and East Berlin during the Cold War. Right,
exactly right.
You cross the street and you get this tremendous, prosperous state of Pennsylvania because they're big oil and gas producers. You listen to Senator David McCormick, who's a friend of ours, and he's terrific stuff. Then you go back to New York, and it's like East Berlin, completely. It's terrible.
Larry, it's worse than what even you're saying because, if you look at a map where all the wells are, they're right on the New York-Pennsylvania border. Right. So because of horizontal drilling, what's happening, they're drilling down, they're drilling underneath.
They're taking New York's oil.
How stupid is that? So just costing themselves.
They're taking New York's oil.
Solving the climate change problem. It's just all the money's going into Pennsylvania.
And we're losing billions in jobs plus billions in tax revenue that could be used for schools and lowering property taxes upstate.
Let me take a break.
So Bruce is right.
Let me take a break. Blakeman, by the way, was very, very good. Steve Moore, his radio show's coming up right after this one on most of these same radio stations. Ace Polster, John McLaughlin. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back.
The Larry Kudlow Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Larry Kudlow Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're talking to two of the best, Steve Moore, whose WABC radio show comes up right after this broadcast on most of these same radio stations, and John McLaughlin, Ace Polster, and head of McLaughlin and Associates. John McLaughlin, Newt Gingrich's latest piece, very, very interesting. Democrats could get an alarming wake-up call in 2026. Nobody likes big government socialism. Nobody likes tax increases. Nobody likes letting males in girls' locker rooms. Nobody likes open borders and protecting illegals. And nobody likes favoring criminals over the strengthening the police. Now, that's a powerful argument if the GOP makes it.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, Newt's exactly right. The Republicans, if they want to win, Trump's not on the ballot this year. They need to have their own agenda and go after Chuck Schumer, who's very unpopular. He would lose in a second in New York State if he was up for re-election. He'd probably lose a primary. And then Jeffries, Speaker, wannabe Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, is his accomplice. And these guys, they're undermining Trump at every second on all these issues, whether it's voter ID, whether it's the tax cuts. They had Democrats vote to raise taxes. Every Democrat in the House and Senate voted against the Trump tax cuts and for a tax increase of $1,700 on every American. So Newt's right. We need an agenda on them. Plus, they would allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. These Democrats are like unbelievable the way they would appease the Iranians. We saw how that didn't work. They would have had 11 bombs this year if it wasn't for Donald Trump. So
So Newt's right.
So that's it.
Offense, you need a scorecard.
I'm telling you, the Iran campaign is a sleeper issue. I mean, I have great faith in President Trump and his advisors and the military. I think it's going to turn out very well. Steve Moore is going to be right about the big drop in oil and gasoline prices. I think it's going to be a sleeper issue because Democrats have been opposed to this from day one. And they'll still talk it down. They'll still attack it even after it's over successfully. So I think that's a problem. Now, Steve, going to you on the economy. Steve Forbes, talking to me at the top of the show, very kind. He wrote a column about the so-called the Kudlow plan.
Oh, John.
But you know what? I mean, look, we need a second big, beautiful bill this year. Defense, Department of Homeland Security, right? Let's open up TSA, voter ID, and tax cuts. It would be a tremendous package, and they can get it through reconciliation. You don't need 60 votes. You only need 50, plus Vice President is 51. That's the way to get this stuff done. These are issues that people like, including, I put in voter ID. So a second big, beautiful bill, Steve Moore.
It's time for that, and we should add indexing of capital gains for inflation, because that's something that's A, very pro-growth, and B, most Americans view that as very fair. It's not fair to tax people. You know, you bought a house 40 years ago for $400,000 and it's worth $3 million now, and most of that's inflation, and they're going to tax you on it. So that would be a very good one. Look, I'm all in favor of this. We do need a second reconciliation bill. One of the items we had, Larry, in our hotline this week, that's apropos to what you're talking about, is when you tell people, you know, you got a $3,000 tax cut,
right,
thanks to the big, beautiful bill, their support for the bill goes up to, three-quarters. If they don't know that, then only about 25% of the people support the bill. So let's get that message out there. Look at your paycheck, folks. You're getting more money back. If you're a tipped worker, no tax on tip. If you're getting Social Security benefits, no tax on that. So people need to be, I think our side has been somewhat delinquent and just talking all the time about the benefits to people's pocketbooks, especially at a time when people are worried about affordability.
They've got to lay it out. They've got to sell it specifically, just like you're doing now, with the numbers, okay? Put it in there. How much money is the middle class saving on taxes? And by the way, Forbes had a good point. Why not a middle class reduction in tax rates? Why
I like
not?
That.
Remember, you and I used to talk years ago, raise the brackets, widen the brackets, and cut the rate. I mean, it would be fantastic.
Well, I love that idea too, and Trump and his team needs to just, and then all Republicans. And the Ways and Means Committee, by the way, put out a report, Larry, you may have seen, that showed that actually rich pay a higher percentage of the tax now, not a lower. I was on CNN, believe it or not, the other night with some liberal congresswoman from Washington. She called the big ugly bill. I said, ugly? I said, ma'am, are you against a $2,500 tax cut for the middle class? And she just stammered. She didn't have anything to say about that.
By the way, people should really dial up the Committee to Unleash Prosperity hotline. It's a daily. It's unbelievable how important it is in all these issues every single day. It's terrific stuff.
Thank you, Larry.
John McLaughlin, the GOP, I don't know, they need to go to one of those classes for salesmanship and marketing. I mean, they've got powerful points to make that they get bogged down and stuff, and they just don't make them.
No, they fall into the traps for the Democrats all the time. But what you need is, as I'm listening to you, Steve, you need like waiters, waitresses, people who work for tips saying, I'm getting more money.
Right.
You need people who work for overtime saying, I'm working overtime. The reason I'm doing the overtime is I'm not being taxed on the overtime. And then you need seniors talking about their tax credits. So you need real people providing testimonials how this really helped them in their real lives. The problem is, back in, Steve, you were talking about, paychecks. That was Reagan in the days when we cut taxes. Mm-hmm. You can see it on your pay stub. People get deposits in their account right now, and they're paying with Apple and credit cards, and they don't see it. They're paying with their phones. But they have to be told and reminded, and when they do their taxes, they'll know if they're getting a refund. They can compare it to last year.
Reagan called it take-home pay. It was really fantastic to go after the middle class. Take-home pay is so important. Steve Moore, one last one. Despite your best efforts and mine and our pals, Elizabeth Warren is still pushing a wealth tax. The state of Washington just jacked up all their taxes, including wealth. Other Democrats are pushing for this. A wealth tax, so it will be less wealth. You tax something, you get less of it. Yeah. I mean, this is great. It's like the New York model run nationwide. This is not good.
Well, one of the major themes I'm going to talk about on my show coming up is the fact that the red states are just bleeding the blue states dry. In other words, so much of the wealth, so many of the taxpayers, some of the businesses, they're all just leaving these tax states like California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And where are they going? Florida, and Texas. And how much longer can this go on before they wake up and say, maybe we should be cutting our taxes too?
All right. Steve Moore coming up right after this show on most of these same radio stations. More money. John McLaughlin, thank you. Happy and holy Easter to both of you. Appreciate it. And folks, happy and holy Easter to you. I'm Kudlow. We'll be back next weekend. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to The Larry Kudlow Show. You can hear The Larry Kudlow Show Saturday mornings at 10. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.